when they talk about music and you hear something that's really impactful, people usually refer to it as like, man, that's a bar. That that last nugget you gave, man, just about again, just because you can do something right doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing. That is a whole bar for sure.
Right about now, you are listening to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, a show where we discuss living as a leader worth following, leading others to do the same, and in doing so, leaving a legacy for future generations. My name is Jimmie Gonzalez Jr., a learning and development professional and leadership coach, sitting down with my co-host, Anthony Devon Watts Jr., an expert contact center leader that has effectively led and developed dynamic teams with high motivation. Together, we have over 30 years experience in the corporate game. Join us as we discuss our growth as leaders, share the lessons we've learned, and interview others to see how their leadership style was shaped as they were mentored by adversity. Boom, we're recording.
Yes, boom, we're recording.
See, that's what happened.
Cool.
We missed that.
Exactly. All right. All right. So, hello, good people, and welcome to episode 2 of the Legacy and Leadership Podcast. I'm your co-host, Devon Watts, here with my good friend, Jimmie Gonzalez. Before we go any further, let me start off by saying thank you to our first-time viewership and listenership. Thank you to our repeat viewers and listenerships, those who've been in it for the long ride with us since episode 1. You're loyal. We appreciate you. And we're just happy that you're able to come back. For sure. So how you feeling today, man?
I'm good, man. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It has been somewhat of a long day, but I'm hanging in there. I have some cold brew that I'm drinking right now, so it is all good. I'm hyped and I'm ready to go. But yeah, I'm feeling good. Working, getting some things taken care of. With at the job and working on some strategy sessions and of course more learning and development content and some of these projects, that we have going on. So it was a good day.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I don't have a cold brew. I'm actually drinking coconut water. I'm not going to show y'all the logo though, because we're not sponsored by them.
No sponsors yet.
Yeah, but it's pretty decent, all things considered. I'm still riding off of the caffeine high that I got earlier today. There's like this little Cuban, because obviously I'm here in South Florida, right? So there's like a bunch of Cuban spots, but so there's a little Cuban spot that's inside of a gas station that's like right in front of the plaza of the new site. And so I hopped in there because like you can get like a pastry for like $1.30, and then like you can get like this, like the Cuban coffee, but like I guess the cortado is what it's called. Cortado. I don't know. I'm sounding like super like gringo right now. Right. But anyway, the Cuban coffee, right?
I know what you're talking about.
Like it's potent enough it could be used as jet fuel. So like I go in there, all right, and I'm like, all right, let me get a pastry and stuff like that. And let me get some of this coffee like everybody's been talking about. And so I'm asking the guy like, hey, which one? And so he's like, okay, well, like what size do you want? And so there's like the regular, which is this big, literally like the size, right? Then they have like the large, which is like this size, and then they have like the extra large, which is like just like a regular, like a little like solo cup, right? And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm like, well, let me get the regular, right? So he's like, all right, cool, that's gonna be like $1. And then I look, and it's like a $5 minimum to use your card, right? And I ain't got no cash on me. It's like the Rona out, like, all right. I'm like, all right, man. Well, let me get the largest size so I can get to the $5 minimum, right? And so when I said, yeah, let me get the largest size, he's looking at me like,
you sure you want to do that?
I was like, yeah, man, just let me get that, right? And then so he's like, okay, you want some cups to share? I'm like, no, I ain't gonna share. Like, there's like nobody in the site. It's just me, man. Just give me the large, right? Like I'll sip on it throughout the whole day, bruh. I took about 2 shots, and I could feel my heart in my toes. Like I was sitting in my chair. I was just sitting there like, oh my God. Nobody's supposed to have this much energy. My body doesn't know what to do with it. So I'm still riding off of that high from like
Yeah.
11 o'clock in 11 o'clock in the morning. It's like 10 o'clock at night. So I don't need no more caffeine. So I'm wired and I'm excited because that energy should definitely carry me into today's podcast. Right. And so for those who attended the first episode and listened to the first episode, you know that this episode I'm really excited about. It's an opportunity for us to get to know more about Jimmie and his leadership journey. We're going to learn more about the leadership servant, which honestly I'm super geeked for because again, over our 12 years friendship, I've heard bits and pieces of just kind of your adventures through corporate America, right? But
all the highs and all the lows,
for sure. And I've been a part of them. I've witnessed them on the sidelines. Like, oh man, it's crazy. But I'm looking forward to just really kind of hearing from start to finish the moments and the experiences you've had that have really kind of formed the leader that you are today. And so I'm geeked to hear that. Hopefully, our audience is just as excited as they kind of hear your story and your background and the things that you've gone through to get to where you're at today, man.
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
Let's
so
go.
you ready to jump into it? Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So, obviously, leadership is not for the faint of heart, right? Like, you have to be wired a certain type of way to want to be able to take on that mantle of leadership. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it's always clear early on that that's our calling, right? And so I think when most leaders think back, there's probably a moment or instance where there's a glimmer of, hey, maybe I'm called to do something a little bit bigger. Maybe I'm called to do this, right? And so I'm just curious for you, like, what was that moment for you where you were like, hey, I think leadership is what I've been blessed with and what I've been called to do. And like, how did you know it was that moment? And then like, what was your first like real leadership experience?
No, that's a good question. I think, in a way, having somewhat of a lack of confidence, I don't know if there was ever a point where like, yes, I'm a leader. Even recently, as I left corporate America and came back and I started working with you again, I remember Richard, as he hired me, was like, I didn't hire you to be like this training person. Like I hired you to be a leader. And man, it's been 4 years now and I've still pondered. I feel like I have a much better understanding now, but I still pondered, kind of exactly what he saw, what he meant by that. But one of the first instances where somebody, I think saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. And I feel like maybe I've told you this story before. I don't know how long ago, if I did, but it's about football. And we talk about football a lot. So
all the time. Hey.
Not going to be necessarily a main topic of these podcasts, but man,
I can't promise that.
Well, we'll try to infuse some leadership conversations into football. We'll see what happens during the fall. So, yeah, man, in the 8th grade, I was playing for what was then called the Pine Hills Chiefs, Pop Warner League. And I was on what we call the big boy team, kind of 140 pounds, I think, or so, like 130 above. Like I had just hit that mark.
Hold on. I got to call out that name would not fly in today's climate. The parents are not going to be down for, you ain't put my baby on no big boy team. He is regular size.
Yeah, he's regular, or he's he's a big bone. Nah,
he's a big bone.
He's a big bone. But yeah, I was on a big boy team, and again, Pine Hills Chiefs. And there was 3 teams. We won the championship that season. It was crazy the journey that we went through. But there was unfortunately only 3 teams again at this weight class. So great season though. It was fantastic winning that championship. Hey, at least I was a champion.
Yeah, the ship is the only thing that matters.
Exactly. At some point in my football career. So I digress. At the beginning of the season, and this, Pop Warner High School, there's kind of that jamboree prior to the season starting. So we had this jamboree coming up, and the other two teams within, again, our weight class were playing a half against both of those teams. And I can't remember if it was the second half, but we're doing our thing, having a good game and, kind of going back and forth. And now that I think about it, I guess we didn't really have like a backup quarterback. Our quarterback gets hurt, and we're like, okay, this was like the person that we were kind of putting all the eggs were in that one basket, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're on the sideline, and coaches are kind of looking around, and they're looking to make a decision and had to do it pretty quickly so we can get back on the field. And coach looks over and he's like, Jimmie, you're going in and you're playing quarterback. And I'm like, all right, okay, coach. If you say so. So I played linebacker, and I also played Iron Man. I also played offensive line. I was a guard on the team at the time. I actually did pretty well blocking, for the quarterback who was now hurt. That wasn't my fault, I promise. But bro, if the people who are watching our video podcast, they may not necessarily be able to tell, but like, I'm not very tall. If you don't know me, I'm like 5'5". I'm not a quarterback, not in my wheelhouse. I can't really throw. I don't have a strong arm like that. So the fact that the coach asked me to go and play quarterback was just super surprising to me within that moment. And then he and I would say he draws up the play. He's like, and we're going to do a flea flicker. And it's like super complicated, but you got to like pass it to one person. They're passing it back. You do something else. Like it's not just handing the ball off. It's somewhat of there's timing involved, in this kind of play.
For sure.
My best friend at the time, he played wide receiver, and coach was like, yeah, you're going to do the flea flicker. And when you get the ball, I just want you to throw it up in the air to the goal post, and Ray Sean's going to catch it. And I'm like, okay, coach, if you say so. Like, I'm looking at the position that we were at on the field and where the goal post was at. Again, not having a strong arm. So hike the ball, going through the flea flicker. I give it to the running back. He passes it back. I look up. I'm like, nah, this is not going to happen. I tuck the ball down. I start running. I got maybe 1 or 2 yards. I got tackled. So it was a very hindsight. It was fun, kind of nerve-wracking experience. But what that showed me, looking back over the years, is my coach saw something in myself that I didn't necessarily see at the time. And, he trusted me with the ball and trusted that I wasn't necessarily going to make a mistake or have a turnover. And that meant a lot to me in 8th grade. And it really helped to kind of propel, me from then on. Again, I didn't necessarily leave that moment, telling myself, oh, I'm a leader. And by no stretch of the imagination, there was still a lot of growth. But again, as over the last, 30 years or so, being able to look back on that, and other instances where, again, people are seeing things in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself, and they're able to pull that out and help you grow as a leader. I don't necessarily feel that leaders are born, that they're developed, and they're kind of taught, and they work to get to that, that type of role and that type of trust. So that was that first moment. And then, from a positional perspective, working at Dial America, that is a third-party telemarketing firm that I was working for. That was the first position where I was now a team manager and, responsible for leading other teams. And yeah, just realizing that this is it. I'm in it now, and taking the experiences that I had already received up until that point, and saying, okay, now I'm in it. What could I really do with some of these learnings? And there was a certain level of confidence, that I had at, in my early 20s, thinking that I probably knew more than I really did. So needless to say, there was a lot of mistakes that I made, but being able to learn from those. But yeah, man, that was kind of, again, my first opportunity to get into leadership from a positional perspective.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned, which I think is kind of critically important, and obviously, me, and both of us are into like Marvel movies and superhero movies, right, and stuff like that. And so I think about like origin stories, right? Yeah. And so I think like as leaders, all of us, part of our origin story is usually something early on in our childhood where somebody saw a characteristic, an attribute, a skill set in us, and they took the time to invest in that, develop it, pour into us, and nurture that. And that's kind of the genesis for where we ultimately end up in terms of our leadership walk, right? To your point, it's not that necessarily you walk away from that one moment and it's like, okay, I have clarity about life, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I know exactly what I'm called to do, right? But I think it's just when you have enough of those instances, enough of those moments where there are people around you that either possess those attributes themselves, and so they can recognize it in others, and they take the time to reaffirm it, to entrust you, to nurture it, that really starts to set you on a totally different trajectory. And so it's really interesting that, as funny, honestly, as funny as that entire situation is, you can still call back to it, even now, like you said, 30 plus years later, and just understand in hindsight, the weight of that moment and kind of what was going on. And obviously in the moment, you couldn't process all of that. You're probably just thinking like, I don't want to throw no interception. You know what I mean? Like we about 50 yards away from the end zone. I don't know what coach is talking about. I'm going to see if I can tuck this thing. But in hindsight, after having lived life and been a leader and obviously developed, quite a few people and mentored and poured into people, you recognize that that's exactly what was occurring in that moment, which I think is like super dope, man. Super, super dope.
Yeah.
So you talked about, okay, you've officially got your first leadership opportunity with Dial America. Again, for our listeners who may not be familiar with Dial America, again, it's a telemarketing company. Actually, they're probably the most preeminent like call center company, telemarketing company in the country at one point. Like,
yeah,
they're legit. I mean, they had America in their name, so you know they're good. Had to be. That's just how it works. But so you finally get entrusted with that official opportunity, right? And I'm pretty sure, even leading up to that, you exhibited some leadership characteristics, and you were already a leader amongst your peers, influencing folks, sharing your experiences. And so somebody saw that and said, you know what, Jimmie, it's your time. You're the one. We trust you. You're responsible for these people. You're accountable for the results and their outcome. And if they succeed, it's in spite of you. And if they fail, it's because of you. But you got to get them to succeed, right? Thinking about that moment and thinking about where you're at now as a leader and the things that you know, what do you wish you knew in that moment that you know now to prepare you to lead?
I think one of the things that first come to mind is leading by example, and the importance of doing so. So one of the things I appreciated about that particular company with their onboarding strategy for new managers is that as you're coming in, like they don't just give you your team right away. You had to do 120 hours of phone time right there in the trenches with everybody else and people that may be on your team, once you get past that point. Yeah. And not really something I wanted to do at the time. I had already been on the phones for, X amount of time, and I was in this leadership position, right? Because I didn't want to be on the phones anymore. I wanted to lead people, that I was going to be good at it. But what I appreciate about that is that it gave me that opportunity to show that I was able to do the job, to do the work. Maybe I wasn't as great as some of the best salespeople in there, but I can hold my own. And it also gave me an opportunity I had already been doing phone work up until that point, but even more of an appreciation for what those individuals and those employees were going through within, that arena. And it's just important, man. It's important to be the type of leader, for me anyway, that, just doesn't necessarily tell people what to do or kind of give directions, but I'm going to get in there. I'm going to get my hands dirty. I'm going to help teach. I'm going to help show. And if we have to do the same job and do it together, like I'm willing to do that. So that was really important for me to learn through that experience, is how important it is to lead by example. The other thing, I remember, a few months had already gone by and I had finished 120 hours. I have my team, and I was working on the PM shift from like 5 to 9. And I remember a situation where I was still, early 20s, and there was another young guy in there, and there was some conversations going on, not necessarily bad conversations, but they didn't necessarily have to do with the work at hand. And I'm sitting there listening, kind of walking around the cubicles and whatnot, and he said something, and I kind of just threw something out there, thinking that I was, I don't know, providing some wisdom or something like that. And dude got like super upset and like, "Who are you?" And like just started cursing at me, and I'm like, "Whoa, like hold down, buddy, like it's not that serious." But for him, it was. And my boss, after the fact, had kind of gotten us into a room, and we squashed everything and talked about the situation. But I thought I had a certain level of understanding with that individual that I had not yet earned. There wasn't trust there, to be able to kind of speak into his life in that particular way. So I learned within that moment, it's very important to really seek to understand people and build trust and build relationships, in order to be able to really be seen as a leader, and to be able to provide guidance, especially when you're trying to do so, not necessarily again from a work perspective, but maybe just about general conversations or life, in itself. So yeah, it wasn't a it wasn't a fun experience in the moment. Of course, like it's loud. It wasn't like it was a huge call for like people are seeing what's going on, and it was somewhat embarrassing. But you make mistakes, man. You make mistakes, and you learn from those things. So I think again, leading by example, the importance of really getting to know people, earning their trust and their respect, are two things that I wish I definitely know now, that I wish I would have known, in those moments. But it is what it is, right? You go through those situations, and again, hopefully you learn from them, and you become better because of it.
No, 100%, man. 100%. Honestly, I think, to be real, all of us as leaders have wished that we had a better mastery of those kind of things early on in our leadership experience, right? You kind of get tasked with, hey, um, you're in charge, right?
Hmm.
And it's always coming from a good place. You want to do a good job. You want to make sure that you're pouring into others. You want to make sure that you're delivering results, and that you're doing something that you can be proud of.
Hmm.
And every once in a while, you kind of get out over your skis, for lack of a better term, right? And next thing you know, you're like, man, I'm going downhill really fast, and I don't know if I can stop.
This escalated really quickly. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I'm glad I'm glad Buddy didn't try to swing on me or nothing like that. That would have been super bad. Uh but everybody like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like, literally just cursing me out. Like
no,
I wasn't, I wasn't scared or anything like that. It was just I was just more thrown off. And
mhm.
again, like more embarrassed, than anything else, and realizing, man, I think I just overstepped a boundary. And I again didn't do it intentionally, but had to learn really, really quick, in those moments. So
For sure, man. For sure. So, um, kind of thinking about those early moments, right? And
mhm,
you talked about like your manager at the time was able to pull you in and pull obviously the other associate in, and you guys were able to hash it out and kind of come to an understanding. And I'm pretty sure there was some additional, private conversation that your manager had with you, just like, hey, let me kind of walk you through where this kind of went left and what you could have done differently. And um, kind of looking back over your career, not just that moment, but as you continue to progress, I'm curious, are there leaders that you can think back to that you pull from, from a leadership perspective, whether they're folks that you've worked directly with, or thought leaders in the leadership space that are kind of out there that you've been able to just kind of study and digest and incorporate into your leadership style? And if so, who and what did you take away?
mhm. Um, John Maxwell is, a leadership guru. Obviously, an author, has written several books on leadership. So he's somebody that I followed for a long time now, and have gleaned a lot from his different books, and even now just watching him on webinars, and being able to get a better understanding of, one of the books he has is the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and being able to really glean some of those skills that are needed, because there's attributes, things that we just kind of naturally have about ourselves, but also some of the skills that you need to really work and develop to continue to grow in that leadership space. I think about my pastor as well, and being able to being blessed to be within the church that I'm at, and again with this pastor for maybe the last 16 years or so, and being able to see how he's navigated, that time within the church, and how he's led and how he's impacted my life, my life personally and my family. And even to this day, just being able to still have, really important and meaningful conversations and just accountability. So those are two people that kind of initially stand out. My first job, I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken at the age of 16. That was the first job. And my best friend at the time, his mom was a manager. I would give a shout out to Kim Brown. Just learned a lot from that lady on how she managed the people. And there was a lot, a lot of us that were young and teenagers at the time, and how she just managed the folks and managed the resources and held us accountable, and made sure that we understood, what the expectations were, but just did so with a loving heart. And again, how she just ran the business at that particular time, and being able to see skill sets within individuals, and putting people in the right spots to make sure that we were running as efficiently as possible, and knowing when it was time for me to move up from doing mashed potatoes and potato wedges to get to that front counter and really start doing some customer service, and being able to deal with those situations. So um, it wasn't really a promotion, but you know how that is. Um, Additional responsibilities. So one of my first bosses, and then even I mentioned, I worked at Dollar America, but before that, I was at Sprint PCS, and I remember the manager that I had there. Every time we would have one-on-ones and I go to his cubicle, every single time, he would stand up, he would shake my hand, he would welcome me, one make sure that I was comfortable, and he was just always very consistent in doing that. And that just meant a lot to me, especially as a young man, and just starting off in my career. My family was very young at the time, and consistency, I think, is very important for a leader, and being able to see that from him meant a lot to me at that particular time. And throughout the years, I think of people that we both know, like Matt Penny's, and his ability to inspire, his ability to teach. Um, uh, Richard Smith, obviously we've worked with for the last several years as well. Um, Really being able to learn how to have tough conversations, and to um, get people to do work and be happy about it, and to actually be excited about it, I think were some things that I gleaned from him. And then you, man, obviously, we've been friends and co-workers for some time now, and being able to see your maturation from the onset, and when I left Sears, and you had already moved on to kind of bigger and better things, and um, took an opportunity to do some entrepreneurial things, and I come back and seeing how you had moved up. And when prior you used to work for me and you reported to me, now I was almost reporting to you. But just proud, man, and seeing how you navigated in that space, and the leader and the man you continue to grow, into being. I've learned a lot from you as well over the last few years. So I've been blessed, man, to really have been groomed and just been around a lot of great leaders. Maybe not all of them were necessarily great teachers, but also being able to observe, how certain leaders moved in certain spaces and in certain situations, and through those experiences, being able to say, okay, I see what they're doing. I see how they said that. I see how they waited. I saw how they were patient in the moment. I saw how they went in, and really pressed people to either get the best out of them, or to press people to make sure that, the individual understood the expectations, and understood what those next steps needed to be, so that, we can achieve whatever goal that we were trying to achieve. So blessed to be around some really good teachers that taught me a lot of great uh, stories, and again, attributes and skill sets along the way, but also being able to observe a lot of great leaders too. So
Yeah, man. If there's anything, honestly, just kind of listen to you share about the people that you pulled from, and then also how you've gone about, kind of learning from these individuals. The thing that I can like double down and just kind of resonate with, and I think it's so important, is not just that people you talked about, like people like verbally like sitting you down and having some type of formalized mentorship, session, but it's the leaders that you learn from by observing their actions, right? I think that that's just an invaluable um, development opportunity if you're aware and you're looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can think about, just like myself personally, some of the most formative, mentors and leadership, experiences I've been able to kind of glean from have come from just seeing how people conduct themselves in the moment and in the situation. My father is a talker, much like me. So not only did he pass on his namesake, but he passed on our affinity for running our mouth, right? And my mother, you've met my mother. My mother's not a talker by any stretch of the imagination, right? And while in her career, she hasn't had a lot of experience, with direct reports and leading people. She's been primarily an individual contributor. Make no two bones about it. She was a lead. She is a leader in her own right, and just especially in the household, just seeing how she handled situations where maybe I disappointed her, or my sister pissed her off, or we're dealing with some type of adversity in the family, and bad news, and just how she navigated those situations. I was able to just take away so many nuggets around nurturing and empathy and care, and add those into my arsenal as a leader. And I would say the other thing that kind of resonates with me as I'm hearing you talk about all these leaders that you've been able to pull from. And let me be clear, I am humbled, honored by the fact that you're able to draw inspiration from me. Obviously, you've played a huge role in my life, both professionally, but more importantly, personally. You and I both know everything that we've been through, and so. To know that I've been able to inspire you is definitely an awesome feeling. But there was a leader that you and I both had the opportunity to work with, and he passed this word on to me, and I'm pretty sure he passed it on to you. And it's just stuck with me ever since, which I remember him sitting me down and telling me, you have to remember that for all those people that you're leading, at any moment, you can be the topic of their conversation at the dinner table, right? And that just like put it in perspective to me, whether you're leading, 15, 20 people, or, 500 people, I'm thinking about prior roles, that I've had, or, even you right now in your capacity, you're providing, learning development support for an organization of over 1,000 people, right? It's realizing or remembering that your actions as a leader will come up at the topic of somebody's dinner, right? And how do you want that conversation to go, right? Are they talking about how you've positively impacted them and poured into them and really changed their life in a profound way, and maybe help contribute to them achieving something that's a huge goal for their family? Or do you want the conversation to be around how you really subtracted from them, and have impacted them negatively, and didn't motivate them, didn't inspire them, they're looking to leave? And so that's just kind of always stuck with me. Now, obviously, the conversations about you at the dinner table are not always going to be perfect if you are, holding people accountable and having difficult conversations. But this is something I've learned from you, and it sounds like it's something you picked up from, your early years at KFC from Kim, which is you can have those difficult conversations, but have them in a nurturing, empathetic, understanding way that helps people realize that there's a gap there, but that you're committed to helping them close the gap if they truly have desire to improve, and that you want them to be successful. And so, yeah, that's I don't know if you remember that word, but that's something that stuck with me, man.
Absolutely. two things that I got from that individual. That one was very profound. I was even talking to somebody about that recently and sharing that word with them within the last month. And so the fact that at the dinner table, at the breakfast table, again, somebody could either be talking positively or negatively about you and how that impacts their family or their situation. And ultimately, regardless of what space or industry, the business, it's really about people. It's not about the widgets and the product itself, but it's really about the people who make things go and who really allow the business to thrive. And again, even with that example I shared, with you, the mistake I made early on, just not realizing that it is about the people and how do we nurture them, develop them, grow together, and work together to be able to add value to each other, and obviously add value to the business that we're working with. So
Mm.
some good nuggets, man. That I've been able to both of us have been able to pick up, from these leaders that we've worked with along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you often like to say, if you receive the word, know that it didn't land with you; it was on its way to somebody else. And so, all of these nuggets that you've shared and that we picked up along the way, I know that we've been intentional about
Hmm.
passing them on. And obviously, our listeners, hopefully, you guys continue to do the same. And if there's anything that resonates with you, you take the time to pass it on and know that that word was on its way to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I guess the kind of the last question I really got for you, right? After having amassed all of these nuggets over your 20 plus years of experience and these skill
Hmm.
sets, and from your early dive into the pool of leadership in eighth grade, leading your team to the big boy championship to where you're currently at.
Great
Um,
times.
when you think about all those skills, man, just what leadership skill, attribute, characteristic that you've developed, you currently possess that you hope to pass on to your family and to other leaders that kind of come into your sphere that you have an opportunity to mentor, influence, and pour in.
Hmm. There's a couple of things that come to mind. I think the first thing that I definitely try to share with folks, and it is a little bit more about my personality, so it depends on the individual. But there was a time where you could be very driven and very focused on your goal and the thing that you're trying to achieve. But any success that you have, man, like it's not as meaningful and doesn't really mean much if you're not doing it with other people and you're not bringing people with you. And early on in my career, being so driven, I remember you talked about your parents, and both my parents have been phenomenal examples of leadership in my life as well. And my mom was like, you have to be really careful because you're going to turn around and you're moving so fast, with the things that you're trying to do. You're going to turn around and you're going to be by yourself.
Mm,
And like, I don't want that for myself. And I definitely don't want that for my family and for other people that are around me that I'm trying to teach, some of these leadership concepts and skills and just experiences that I've had. Um, Again, we talked about on the first episode the fact that we've had conversations about doing a podcast, and it was something I've been talking about for years and never did. And maybe it wasn't meant for me to do by myself, but now we're having this opportunity again to come together, and it's just that much more meaningful when you can share again accomplishments and achieving goals with other people. So I think that's something that's important, and the discernment to know that just because you can do something right doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing.
mm,
Just because you're doing something right doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing.
mm,
And for leaders, I think that is very important to understand that, because we may have, a lot of different skills and experiences that, give us chances to do a multitude, of different things. But sometimes, that task or that role is just not for you at that moment. And again, just because you're really good at doing something doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing at that particular moment. So having, and this comes with time, just the wisdom and discernment, and praying for that, that you're able to receive those things um, to be able to know that and navigate through those times. And in doing so, realizing that you may have to say no. you may have to say no to people who are requesting things of you. But again, knowing that, yes, I could do that and probably do a really good job, but that is just not for me at this particular moment. And there's other things that, are calling me and my attention, and that need that at the time. So,
Wow, man. When they talk about music and you hear something that's really impactful, people usually refer to it as like, man, that's a bar. That that last nugget you gave, man, just about again, just because you can do something right doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing. That is a whole bar for
mm,
sure. And I really appreciate just kind of hearing that. I think that's kind of the first time I've heard something like that, and like as soon as you said it, it just connected with me. Like, oh,
mm,
that's good. That's absolutely right. Because you're right, man. It does. I think that comes with maturity.
hmm
As you mature in your leadership walk and your personal walk and your faith, you're able to identify those things. And like you said, have that discernment to say, well, look, yeah, just because I can do it
yeah,
doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. And that doesn't solely mean like an issue of morality. I want to make sure
hmm
that people are clear about that. Like,
yeah,
doing something unethical as much as it is. I think about you were sharing with me before we got started. All right, how you attended your first HOA board meeting for your community, right? And jokingly, I asked you, "Are we going to see HOA president Jimmie Gonzalez?" And you had the discernment to say, "Well, they had elections, and you could just put your name in, and only 3 people put their name in, and those 3 people got put on the board." And I just decided not to put my name in because I have so many other things going on that I know I could do it, but it's not the right thing for me to do right now. That's just a classic example of how you've actually exemplified that and executed on that and really hold that to be true.
yeah. That was a whole experience in itself. Our first HOA meeting, as we're turning it over now to the homeowners in the community. But not, you're right. It's um, knowing that, again, you can provide some value, but also taking a step back. Like, if there's other folks that have that passionate that desire, allow them to kind of have those leadership positions. And if there's going to be, a committee or something like that where I can still provide value and some assistance, I'll do that, without necessarily taking, one of those kind of official positions. So yeah, it's about balance, just balancing those things within your life. And that does come through experience and time, sometimes trial and error, as you're trying to figure those things out for yourself, and growing and realizing how much capacity you have
Mm.
to do work and to multitask and to do different things, at a given time or at a given moment. Uh, but again, if I can pass that along to help somebody's learning curve and shorten that for them, then obviously that's what we're trying to do, right? Oh, I'm hitting my mic.
Don't drop it on them. I know it's a bar. Like, no, you're absolutely right, man. Again, going back to it, the word that you're receiving, it was on its way to somebody else, and so
Yeah.
um, thank you, man. Wow, this is awesome. Like to have the opportunity to just kind of hear your journey from start to finish. I can speak for myself, and obviously, if the listeners disagree, you can say something right now. Exactly. But I can speak for myself, which is, man, no, this has just been great to just kind of understand a little bit more about your journey, your walk, and what's really helped to, make you the leader that you are today. And it's awesome for me personally to just kind of hear the moments that preceded, us getting to know each other and building our
hmm
friendship, and how, those things that you learned, in your teens and your 20s, again, you were able to pass on to me when I was in my teens and my 20s, and just developing as a brand new leader. And to know that, those carried you over those years and, pass it on to me. And to know, to be honest with you, there are things that I pass on, today, literally today, I was meeting with my group, and I dropped some of the nuggets that I've gotten from you along the way in our meeting. So uh,
Yeah.
thank you, man. No, this has been great.
No, I appreciate the questions, and kind of giving me an opportunity to go down memory lane and think about some of those stories and funny stories and situations that I've been through, and again, just really thinking about all those leaders that have impacted my life along the way. So, um, So yes, I think that again, it was good to. Sometimes you got to take a step back and want to appreciate, what you've been through over the years. Again, the blessings um, that you've had just because of the people that you've been surrounded by. Um, so yes, I definitely appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to, as we continue to move on to our next episode, episode 3, where we'll be turning the tables around, and I'll be able to ask you some of these same questions. And I was able to observe and witness, a lot, most of your growth, especially early on anyway. It'll still be good to be able to hear your perspective again on these examples. And I'm interested to hear about the leaders that you've looked up to and that you've just focused on in your development and your growth over the years. So looking forward to episode 3. I hope that our listeners out there are also looking forward to episode number 3. For those that are listening right now, we definitely, again, we really, really appreciate you taking time to land here, to listen. If you're watching the video podcast as well, to watch and continue to go along with us through this particular journey. Please subscribe. So if you're listening on the podcast right now on all of the streaming platforms, please subscribe to that. If you've landed to our YouTube channel, again, hit the like on the episode. Please also subscribe and share. We're going to continue to ask. We're doing our best to share with you and hopefully provide some nuggets and really add value. And if you find anything, again, of value within these conversations, please, share the YouTube channel. Get your friends and family to subscribe. You could also find us on Instagram at Legacy Leadership, and you could also find us on Facebook at Legacy in Leadership Podcast. So please find us on those different social media platforms, like, follow, all that kind of good stuff. But definitely get to the YouTube channel and hit subscribe and like the episodes.
Absolutely. Awesome, man. Any last thoughts?
No, this has been good. Like I said, I appreciate the journey. I'm looking forward to continuing to move forward, man, And like I said, looking forward to episode number 3 and learning a little bit more about you. And hopefully, I know I'm confident. I'm confident in my boy and that you're going to give us some good stories that I probably haven't heard before. So, no pressure. No pressure.
Awesome, man. Thank you, bro.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
You have just listened to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, hosted by Jimmie Gonzalez and Devon Watts. Thank you, and we hope that you live, lead, and leave a legacy worth remembering. Until next time.